American football is the most popular spectator sport in America. Personally, I absolutely love it. The pageantry, the big plays on offense, the stops on defense, I love it all. Although the NFL is followed by much of the country, the league has a lengthy offseason that lasts from the beginning of February to the start of preseason games in August. It would make sense that people would eat up a spring football league that took place in the NFL off time, but that hasn't been the case. In the past 2 years, we have seen 2 spring football leagues rise and fall in the Alliance of American Football and the XFL. Or have we? The XFL shut down amid pandemic concerns, rightfully so, and the possibility of it shutting down forever was likely. This changed when The Rock and a team of investors bought it. This move could perhaps usher new life into a successful entity that existed at the exact wrong point in time. Today, we're going to explore why the AAF failed when everything initially seemed set up for it to succeed, what the ongoing situation with the XFL looks like, and whether or not a spring football league can exist long term. Hi, I'm Eli.
I'm Moof.
And I'm Monty.
And this is When the Lights Go Out. All right, how's everybody doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thanks for asking. I'm doing great.
I'm also having a good time, in case you guys care.
Yeah, so this is actually the second time we've recorded this podcast.
A couple things changed between us recording the first one and when we were trying to put it out.
It hasn't been that long.
It's literally been
2 weeks?
probably like
3 weeks?
a week and a half.
A week and a half? Yeah. Time flies, or doesn't fly. But yeah, so I personally thought this was going to be like a really static topic, but since we recorded, The Rock and investors bought the XFL.
$15 million. That seems like a small amount of money to me.
That seems like
for a whole sports league.
Okay, that's fair. So some people are saying, and we can talk about this later. Some people are saying that because The Rock was a wrestler, that he got like a better deal.
Yeah, there was a report that the original investors to the XFL were trying to contest it.
Yeah, because they wanted more money.
Yeah, pretty much they wanted more money, but they weren't opposed to The Rock buying it. But apparently that has been resolved, and right now the sale looks good.
It's really interesting that even a subject that we thought couldn't changes so much. Like, it takes a decent amount of time to produce a podcast, and we go through like a decent amount of research and then writing and then record it and edit it and do all that stuff. And I thought this type of subject would not be we could just do the normal thing we did, but it's crazy that we have to do this a second time.
Yeah, I think sports generally is more dynamic, but this subject in particular, I thought it was not going to change.
Yeah, this is one of those economic, big, longer term type of things. Yeah, so it's interesting because we were in another situation. I was writing a podcast about the Redskins, former Washington football team's name, and some other ones. And then that name change came out before we even launched the website and stuff. So I had a blog post about that. It's really interesting that stuff changes so rapidly and unexpectedly. And that's kind of why we have a website. So if you don't know, you can go to whenthelightsgooutpodcast.com. That's whenthelightsgooutpodcast.com. And it's our website, and you can find all of our podcasts there, but you can also find a bunch of really cool blog posts that might be more relevant to recent news. And big thanks to our editor, Kate Rempe. She's been a big help on those. And you can make sure you check us out also on Instagram at When the Lights Go Out Pod, and our Twitter as well at Lights Go Out Pod.
After you check out the website, if you enjoy the content we have up there, I would like to kind of give you guys an idea of the schedule we're going to have for the posts when we put them out there. So basically, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we plan on posting some form of content. Every other Friday, we plan on posting our podcast, but on the weeks where we don't have the podcast, we'll be filling in with a sports and review blog post, which will be followed by the Starting Your Week with Eli blog post on Mondays, and then we'll have a general sports interest blog post on the Wednesdays.
All right, so we're going to start with the Alliance of American Football. The AAF was a spring league that began operating in 2019 and lasted 8 weeks of play. It was created by Pro Football Hall of Famer Bill Polian and producer Charlie Ebersol. Bill Polian immediately gave the league credibility as he is well known for building the 4-time AFC Championship Bills teams in the early 90s, as well as drafting Peyton Manning and constructing the 2006 Colts World Championship team. I found out in researching this that Bill Polian also worked in the USFL and CFL before his time with the Bills, which I think actually may have informed some of the policies of the AAF, which is kind of cool. All right, so now it's time for our first trivia quiz question.
Woo! Sounds like fun.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
You're ready?
I'm ready.
Are you sure you're ready?
No.
You get okay. I'm glad. Why did you say?
Let's do this.
Okay. All right. So this first quiz question. I'm sorry, Monty, is about Bill Polian. Which NFL team did Bill Polian also help get to a Super Bowl, although it was not in his tenure?
I think I'm going to opt out of answering this question.
You're going to opt out? Okay. You can opt out if you want.
I think I know.
I'm going to give you
the point either way. Are you just going to give me the point, please?
I'm going to give you options.
Oh, okay. Multiple choice.
Yeah, so it's multiple choice. And if you're playing at home, make sure to tweet at us at LightsOutPod. All right.
On Twitter.
So again, which NFL team did Bill Polian also help get to a Super Bowl? A, the Carolina Panthers. I believe that was 2003 against the Patriots. It was the year before the Eagles won, so it would have been the 2003 season. The Tennessee Titans is B. That they lost to the Greatest Show on Turf 99 season. The Atlanta Falcons lost to the
famous Patriots loss. No, just kidding.
It wasn't that one. It was the John Elway's second Super Bowl. Not that this one's for John one, but that was the 98 season. And then the Oakland Raiders, which was I believe the Tuck Rule playoffs. And then they lost to the Tampa Bay Bucks after they traded John Gruden to the Bucks. Crazy stuff. So which of those four teams did Bill Polian help create? Although when they went to the Super Bowl, he was not working for them.
I'm going to guess the Raiders.
I want to opt back in and guess the Falcons.
Okay. Is that your final answer? Why do you think the Raiders?
Because I have no idea, and we're just hitting the ball and seeing where it goes.
Okay, that's a different sport than what we're talking about.
I'm just trying to fill in the time frame between when he was with the Bills and the
right. So yeah, so you're right. All of these teams. So he worked with this team, I believe, in '95, during their inception to '97. Be the Panthers. The market the AAF was trying to tap into was based on the demand for more NFL football after the Super Bowl. It advertised itself as an extension of the NFL that opened its season a week after the NFL season ended and had backing from many former NFL executives and stars. It had broadcast deals with the NFL Network, TNT, CBS, and ESPN, and awarded teams to some areas that lack NFL teams. Each team was made up of former NFL and collegiate stars from the surrounding areas, which seemed to fill the purpose of getting the fan bases excited about their teams.
So when you say it's made of stars from the surrounding areas, you literally mean that they kind of grew up in that area and went to that local team?
Yeah, so I believe there was kind of each team was given a few areas of the country to get players from. So someone that went to college, say if Terrell Suggs went to Arizona State, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he would have only been able to sign with the Arizona Hotshots.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, and who was the third overall pick? Trent Richardson.
Yes, Trent Richardson.
Went to school in Alabama.
Yeah.
Played for the Birmingham Iron. Exactly.
Iron. That was my team.
That was your team?
I got really into the AAF because my roommate at the time, shout out Matt Twillman, got really into the AAF, but then they just...
Yeah, I was an Arizona Hotshots fan. This leads us to our next question. Who wasn't a coach in the AAF? All right, your options are, and none of these people are Bill Polian, Monty.
I really wanted to jump in and just yell Todd Gurley was never a coach for the AAF.
Todd
He's
Gurley,
technically correct.
he is correct, but that's not one of the multiple choice options. So A, Mike Singletary, formerly the San Francisco 49ers head coach, also linebacker for the 85 Bears. B,
Yeah.
Steve Spurrier did coach in Florida as well as for Washington professionally. C, Mike Martz, who you might not recognize that name. He was the offensive coordinator for the Greatest Show on Turf.
Mhm.
And then option D is Jim Mora, coached Peyton Manning, I believe, for 2 or 3 years before Tony Dungy with the Colts, coached the 49ers, and famously said, playoffs? It's great. If you haven't heard that soundbite, it's a great soundbite. So you want me to list the names or you guys got them?
Yeah, go ahead and list the names one more time.
A, Mike Singletary, B, Steve Spurrier, C, Mike Martz, or D, Jim Mora, who did not coach in the AAF.
I'm going to go with Steve Spurrier. I believe that was B.
I kind of feel like Mike Singletary was too good a coach to be a part of the AAF.
All right. The correct answer is Jim Mora.
Dang.
Jim Mora was not a head coach in the AAF. Mike Martz coached, I think, the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Yes.
He did. I think that might have been an XFL team. But so Mike Singletary coached the Memphis Express and Steve Spurrier coached the Orlando Apollos. Jim Mora, the reason I put Jim Mora in there was because he's another kind of coach from that era and also coached Peyton Manning his rookie year, and I believe a year after that when Bill Polian brought Peyton Manning in. So thought I'd trick you with that. Nobody said anything about that, so I don't think it actually did anything. But yeah. So you guys have no points.
Yes.
I honestly thought these questions wouldn't be that hard. The AAF offered a slightly different take from previous tries at spring leagues by offering a faster game with gambling readily available. Instead of kickoffs, teams started at their own 25-yard line for each drive and capped off touchdowns with a 2-point conversion try instead of a PAT. The play clock was set at 35 seconds instead of 40, which it is in the NFL, and there was only a 3-minute break between quarters and a 13-minute break for halftime. Broadcasts featured no TV timeouts and 60% fewer commercials than NFL games in order to reach a goal of about 3.5 real-time hours instead of the generally greater than 4 hours it takes to watch an NFL game. This new league also offered a new referee in the booth known as the Sky Judge, whose job it was to focus on player safety and had the authority to review any play they deemed needed reviewing. That's a big difference with the NFL. And also, instead of onside kicks, if a team was down by 17 points or more within the final 5 minutes of a game, they could try a 4th and 10 from their own 28-yard line. Similarly, instead of a free punt after a safety, teams could try a 4th and 12 from the 18-yard line. And I'd like to add that that's something that the NFL has played around with, I believe, in preseason and other things.
And to clarify, those two things were replacing the onside kick? Yes.
But replacing onside kicks, and then after you get a safety,
it was replacing the punt.
The free punt, yeah. Overtime was more like the current college overtime rules, where each team starts at the opposing 10-yard line and has 4 downs to get into the end zone. The difference is there are no field goals, and teams must go for 2 afterwards. Both teams get a shot, and if the score was tied after 2 overtime periods, then the game was called a tie. That's a little different from the college rules, but I still really like the college overtime rules.
Mm-hmm. And any rules where both teams get a chance to touch the ball, I'm just going to like that inherently more than the NFL's version, because I hate the idea of a team not getting the chance to play in overtime just because their defense couldn't get a stop.
Most of these changes were also, like you said, aimed at making the game just faster and more exciting. And even though the real-time hours, it was only half an hour less than an NFL game, it felt a lot faster.
It did feel a lot faster. I do really like the overtime rules. If you look at any other overtime in any other major sport, baseball, both teams get a shot, extra innings, there's a top and a bottom. Basketball is just a 5-minute period, and both teams, I guess technically you can not touch the ball, but that's not really how basketball works. So it makes a lot more sense to do that anyways. While the game itself was reminiscent of NFL football, the league seemed to position itself as a safe haven for end-of-roster players, throwaway veterans of the NFL, and college players that don't make the cut. Each player was offered a 3-year, $250,000 non-guaranteed contract, health insurance, which is not offered by the NFL, and an educational stipend after their first season for players to continue their education.
I think the educational stipend is a really cool concept because I guess a lot of college players, even though they have to be in college essentially for 3 years, I feel like a lot of them do leave college before their senior year and therefore don't get to finish out their schooling. So having that educational stipend for them to finish their schooling, because this league was never going to be a long-term solution for them, is a really, really good plan.
I guess I have two things. So one, it's awesome that they're allowing people to finish their education because they know their audience. So the players they're going to get might not have finished college or didn't get necessarily the degree they wanted to get. And they also know their audience in the sense that they're trying to pull in the players that, are maybe at the end of their career or just out of college that, got cut, and players at the end of their career might want to do something else. And players that don't get an NFL starting job out of college or an NFL job out of college might not get another shot. So they really know their audience. And I think that kind of brought in more players. The AAF also offered an app with real-time statistics and the opportunity to gamble. Gambling, while not new to sports, is now more widely accepted, and this app was the first of its kind to offer gambling straight from the league itself. The idea of in-game betting at a national level can only exist with the infrastructure of a large company and instant communication technology on a scale that can reach people. This set the AAF up perfectly as the technology and infrastructure was largely in place and sports gambling became acceptable for everyone. They did a really good job. So their app had like live updated statistics, and you could bet while that was happening, while statistics were coming in.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You could say what you want about the league itself. You could say what you want about the gameplay in the league. The app was top notch. The app was really good.
The app was good.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the AAF app was actually the one that lets you see the actual player's position in real time on the field.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how you can do that 2 years ago, but the NFL still has shown no interest in putting that into their own app, or even other sports like basketball or soccer where it could be done pretty easily, just haven't had any interest in that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a proof of concept that it can be done and that people like it. And we'll get into kind of the business plan of the AAF in a little bit, but that could have translated to the NFL easily, I think.
Absolutely. So why did the AAF fail?
Money. That's kind of always the answer in these situations. The AAF ultimately didn't have enough money to sustain itself, even with the network deals and ticket sales. Their long-term plan seemed to be to operate independently for only 2, maybe 3 years, and then to be subsidized by the NFL after it proved its worth, as we kind of talked about with the app. And some of those rules are very different. I believe this would have worked if the AAF could at least break even, but 10 days after play began, the founders had to sell a majority of shares to Tom Dundon since they were losing money very fast. This kept the league alive for almost 2 more months, but Dundon seemed to have different interests than the founders. He spent $70 million outright and pledged another $180 million for the next few years, but actually didn't end up spending any of that pledged money. 8 weeks into their inaugural season, Dundon unilaterally decided to shut the league down. He sort of made an ultimatum where he asked the NFL to share their end-of-roster players, who I should add were under contract, to maybe inject some lifeblood into the league and potentially raise the level of play. Remember, these players had jobs in the NFL where all the other players didn't. The NFL Players Association refused, and the AAF shut down. However, there may have been another reason that Dundon had interest in the AAF other than the development of young players and creation of a spring league like the founders had. The new gambling technology, infrastructure, and app seemed to be a money-making machine in the sports world. A $250 million investment over a few years could lead to a multi-billion-dollar industry as the AAF partnered with the NFL. Maybe after a few months, Dundon saw the technology in use and decided it wasn't worth it. Maybe he believed the AAF couldn't make it a few years before getting subsidized. Maybe he just changed his mind. Either way, it was his decision to shut down the AAF. But contrary to what I just said, Tom Dundon wasn't the arbiter of the AAF's fate. Those in power should have had money for at least one full season before opening the league. The teams played in older stadiums, mainly on college campuses, and often had a fraction of the maximum possible population in attendance. There were low television ratings, and gambling on sports requires a knowledge of historical data of players, which is hard to do when the league is new and filled with mostly unknown players. Basically, it put itself in a bad position before starting and then resorted to selling its soul to the devil who finished the job. So what do you guys think of why the AAF shut down?
I think it was a good business model in that like the planning that went into it. It was a good idea with all the new rules and all the rules changes they implemented. And it was just not there financially.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if a league is going to have it a part of their model that they want to partner with the NFL, it should kind of confirm beforehand that the NFL has interest in it if they make it that far. And it kind of seems, from what I've seen with the NFL leagues, is that they really have no interest in the minor league. So I don't even know if after 3 years, had the AAF been somewhat successful, that the NFL would have even jumped in at that point.
That's a good question, but I'd just like to point out that I think that's a different question because the AAF didn't even make it a full year. Like if it had been able to make it 2 to 3 years and the NFL was refusing to subsidize, I mean, that's a different conversation. In my opinion, they just didn't have enough money and they didn't wait and they should have. It's kind of unfortunate. All right. So we have one more quiz question and neither of you have gotten any right. Woo.
That's okay.
Yeah. So this one's for all the marbles. Monty, how many marbles do you want?
I want all of them.
You want all of them?
I want all the marbles.
Moof, do you
right
want?
Now, I'll just settle for one more than Monty.
One more marble than... All right, well, this one is actually for all the marbles, so... Okay. Which of these teams tied the Atlanta Legends for the worst record in the league? Salt Lake City Stallions, the San Diego Fleet, the Memphis Express, or the Birmingham Iron? You can actually, so because you guys are doing so poorly, I'll let you guys ask like a question or two.
So was it the San Diego Fleet?
I'm not going to answer it that like
because
that.
I was going to pick the San Diego Fleet too.
I'm really feeling San Diego Fleet. I don't need a question.
Okay, so
I'm confident.
You're wrong. You're both wrong. It was not the San Diego Fleet. I will each give you another opportunity because I want somebody to win.
Can you repeat the options? Because I was just
the other three options were the Birmingham Iron, the Salt Lake City Stallions, and the Memphis Express.
I want to say the Iron.
I want to choose the Memphis Express.
All right. Is that your final answer?
I don't want it to be the Iron because that's the team I was rooting for, but I think it's the Iron.
Okay.
I think if we're both wrong, you should just get the win.
I should get the win?
You just win. You stumped us.
All right. Are you locked in?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm locked in.
You said Birmingham Iron?
Yes, ma'am.
Memphis Express?
Yep.
The correct answer was the Memphis Express. So Monty wins all of the marbles. Monty, I will give you marbles after the podcast.
Never doubted it.
After all that struggle, I think he deserves to win.
Yeah. So with a score of 1-0, kind of a soccer score, Monty wins our AAF trivia quiz.
Of the two attempts to form a spring football league in the last few years, the XFL is both the most recent, but also the oldest in a sense. This is because the XFL was originally started in 2001 by Vince McMahon. This was a league that would be partially owned by NBC and the WWF, the latter of the two owners having a major impact on the identity of the league. Specifically, at the time, many NFL fans were complaining about the NFL becoming softer and with increasing their emphasis on player safety and the move towards pass-first offenses. As a result of this, McMahon thought he could make football better just like he did with wrestling and set out to create a violent and sexualized version of the NFL. The 2001 iteration of the XFL initially was very highly marketed using past NFL players like Dick Butkus and overdramatized ads that displayed players running through minefields to create the image of a tougher and more violent football league. This marketing, including the violent or crime-related team names, built up a huge amount of hype that resulted in a great Week 1 TV ratings for the league. However, even in this first game, it was immediately clear that the football product itself was flat out terrible, and much of the focus was placed on making it a personality-driven product that tried to sell sex by focusing way too much on its cheerleaders. This led to an immediate plummeting of ratings in the following leagues and a loss of $70 million for the WWF and NBC, as the league never held a second season. Recently, however, McMahon returned to his IP and decided he could learn from his first attempt and capitalize on a market eager for another football league. In addition, with many social issues being incorporated into the NFL, with events such as the Kaepernick kneeling, McMahon banned these issues from being a part of the XFL when he announced that it would return in 2018. This message was a deviation from the current direction of professional sports and appealed to many who complained about sports becoming increasingly political. In fact, this would become the central tenet to the NFL's return, even being incorporated into the league's motto of "For the Love of Football," to emphasize that this league would focus on the game of football itself.
I think it's really interesting that in both iterations, it was, I guess, in response to something it perceived that the NFL was doing incorrectly. And instead of going after the NFL directly, it was like, it kind of told everybody that we're going to try and subsidize your fans, but in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know why they would pick like not the wrong side of history, but just like the majority of fans, I think, were going in that direction, both in 2001 and now. It seems like it's like fairly popular opinion now to allow the discourse to happen. It just doesn't seem like a good business move to me.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that both times he tried to appeal to the unhappy group of fans in the NFL. He really wanted to appeal to like the curmudgeonly people who were against or just didn't want change to their game that they've been watching for many years by creating a completely new football league, which would be a bigger change than just changing how the game was being played.
So,
yeah, arguably a worse one because there aren't the stars in that league.
So in a way, he was trying to appeal to the traditionalists.
Yeah, but I think it's like the wrong way to do it. Like what the XFL tried to do then and recently was, like the people who don't want change and don't want change in that way, don't want any of the change, like you said, Monty, and they're like picking one thing and not taking the whole problem as it is, or if it is a problem or an issue, if that's what you see, but the controversy. So they're kind of picking one point out and like running with it, and that's a bad idea.
So, what did the XFL change when it came back? Unlike the first iteration of the XFL and the AAF, the XFL, on paper at least, appeared to create a league set up for immediate and long-term success. This came mostly through the overall goals of the league and the staff hired to reach these goals. Specifically, many former NFL coaches were hired as head coaches for the league, and everyone the league hired appeared to have a very solid backing in football and running sports leagues. The best example of this was probably with the hiring of Oliver Luck as the CEO and commissioner of the XFL. Luck, besides being the father of Andrew Luck, was a former professional football player and was highly involved in the NFL Europe League as the general manager of the Frankfurt Galaxy. McMahon's strong commitment to Luck with this large guaranteed contract brought an aura of legitimacy and portrayed the new iteration of the XFL as a non-gimmick league. When you add in the fierce loyalty that Luck and all his staff had towards McMahon, it really made the league seem like it could actually succeed.
Yeah, that's a great hire with Oliver Luck. I mean, he spent time in NFL Europe, right? So, I mean, it's similar to kind of Bill Polian having spent time in.
Monty just cringed.
I'm sorry, Monty, but it's a similar move to having someone run the league that, has been in other leagues.
I also think it kind of shows the difference between the mentalities of the league, where the AAF went for someone who was a general manager who'd worked in the NFL. The XFL went for someone who'd actually run a different league, which kind of shows to me that the XFL wanted to be an independent league, whereas the AAF was just trying to have someone that could kind of incorporate them with the NFL down the line.
That's a good point. The goals were clearly are different, and for the AAF, it was clearly subsidization early on, and the XFL is very different. And I would also add that Oliver Luck being like a quarterback and a player himself for very long also brings a kind of
Je ne sais quoi.
a kind of je ne sais quoi, that's not the word, but he can bring in like other players that maybe the AAF couldn't, because from a general manager's perspective, you can bring in a certain type of players, but maybe Oliver Luck could bring in other players that were retired, like a Marshawn Lynch, or something, maybe not someone that necessarily valuable to the NFL, but you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. While the XFL, for the most part, tried to stay away from gimmicky changes to the sport for their love of football, it did make some new changes that brought new elements to the game. XFL games were faster than NFL games due to a running game clock, introduced safer kickoffs, 3-tiered point after touchdown options, and had a shootout-style overtime rule that unfortunately never had the chance to play out. All of these changes were to the rules itself, but the XFL also brought some new elements to the presentation of football through the introduction of in-game interviews, access to the coach's mic, and greater access to the fans in general. All of these changes to the game were not made on a whim, however, as the league had extensive focus group sessions to see how much they could change the rules without making it no longer feel like football, with the CFLs allowing receivers to get a running start being a notable feature left out of the game because of these focus groups.
I think it's a very smart move on their part that they went out and actually did the required research to get most of the changes they wanted right in like a popular sense,
Yeah, I also think, I had the opportunity to go to 2 DC Defenders games. And I had a fantastic time. But they did a lot of work telling people the new rules. It was kind of like every maybe 5 minutes of game time, they would have somebody like show up and talk to the crowd about it, or just like explain it, or they would have a video up there.
The marketing was on point.
Marketing was definitely on point. And the new rules, I should say in quotes, new rules, are a lot of them were rules that have been talked about in the NFL and other spring leagues. And I think they just piggybacking off of other leagues is not a bad thing.
Yeah, so not only did the league look good on paper, but it also appeared to the public to be working out well, kind of shown by Eli's opinion of the league as someone who's actually been to the games. The league was averaging 1.9 million viewers per game and made $20 million in gross revenue that was expected to be $46 million by the end of the season. While some teams like New York and Los Angeles struggled to fill the stands, teams like St. Louis and other smaller market teams were getting great numbers. In fact, the next St. Louis home game before the season was canceled was expected to have over 45,000 people in attendance, and the Battlehawks made over $6 million in local revenue alone, which exceeded the goal for their entire season.
Just like you said about the focus groups, they did their research, and I think it was a very, very smart move to take a previous NFL market and stick a new football team in there, because St. Louis, since the Rams left, they've been wanting another professional football team of some kind to come in and take their place. And I think it was incredibly smart to just stick it in that market.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like a primed market ready to go with who that spent 20 years watching football, enjoying football, having a team and a stadium, in the city, in the area, and then losing it. And although I don't think anyone would ever consider them a football town over maybe like a baseball town. That's still people that grew up liking the Rams. And then when I don't know if a lot of them still like them because they moved to LA. So, you're kind of, a lot of those people were just left without a football team. And when you give like a market that's primed for that kind of thing, a team to back and a team that's doing well, they're gonna show up.
Perhaps the best reason for these great financial successes was that the game truly looked and felt like football to many of the fans. This was accomplished by providing much longer training camps than in the past iteration of the XFL, and by allowing a full year for coaches and presidents of teams to plan for the inaugural season. Despite this, many of the games tended to be lower scoring compared to NFL games, but this trend seemed to be reversing the longer the season went on, and as the players began to get a better feel for the game itself. This all led up to the last game of the league having a score of 41-34 between the Los Angeles Wildcats and the Tampa Bay Vipers. As a result of these increasingly entertaining games, many fan bases got really into their teams, with some teams even starting fan traditions, like the DC Defenders and their beer cup snake.
Yeah. Dude, that thing was huge. I got to see it in person. Like, nobody in the stadium besides those people knew what was happening. And I kind of just like looked to my left, and there was like the only way to describe it is a beer snake. Like, it was weird.
Yeah,
So-
if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend looking it up online because it's definitely a sight to see.
It's hilarious.
So before I go into the reasons that the XFL failed despite the outward appearance as a well-run league, I want to take a moment to see how many XFL, AAF, and CFL teams that we can all kind of name as a group just to kind of see how well fans as a whole were exposed to the league and how well we can kind of keep that in our minds.
I hope we can get this, because the last time we recorded this, we got them all. And if we don't, I'll be very disappointed.
Yeah. So I guess let's start with the AAF because that was the first one that we talked
All
about
right.
in this podcast.
I should know this. You want to go east to west or just start naming it? Let's go west first. We'll do San Diego Fleet, Salt Lake City Stallions,
2,
San Antonio Commanders,
3. Yeah, San Diego.
San Diego Fleet. Was there a
Oh,
Seattle team, or was that only XFL?
I think that was
I
only
think
XFL.
that was XFL.
There might have been another. We'll circle back. We'll circle back.
Were the Birmingham Iron in
That
the
was
West?
east.
Yeah, so
Okay,
That was
that's the
east.
Okay.
The Orlando Apollos was also east.
Yes.
5.
The there was the Arizona Hotshots was the other West team.
So
Okay,
that's 6.
There you go.
And there were 2 more. The Atlanta Legends,
7.
Oh, the Mike Vick team. I love that.
Yeah.
the Mike Vick team,
The Mike
and
Vick
was there a New York team? No, that's also XFL. We're missing one.
Did we get the Florida team?
Yeah, Florida. Well, what other states are there? It's like a southern. It's a south. Is there Texas? No. We already did Texas. That was west. Come on. Is there a St. Louis team?
No.
No.
Oh, the Memphis Express, of course.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Memphis
That's
Express.
8.
We talked
Good
about that for so long, like earlier
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So we got all 8 of the AAF teams. Let's see if we can do the same for the XFL.
Okay.
All right. So DC Defenders.
That's a good one.
Let's just get one.
My
right
favorite
off the
team
bat.
ever.
Yeah.
The best name.
All right. St. Louis.
Battlehawks.
Battlehawks.
That's
There was
2.
the New York Guardians.
That's
Uh,
3.
The Dallas
Renegades.
Renegades, the Houston
The-
Roughnecks.
The Houston Roughnecks. There was the Seattle Dragons, which is a
Yep.
cool
Yes,
name,
yes.
which is
Then
also
there
the name of the Kraken.
The Kraken.
Of that new,
The Kraken is the new NHL team.
That's
yes.
a great name.
It's a great logo.
It is. It's so good.
The marketing is going to be insanely cool.
Yeah, I wonder what they're going to do with divisions. Do you think they're just going to add the team, or are they going to split
That's
it
a
up?
different conversation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the other 2 teams I think we had the Tampa Bay and the LA teams.
Tampa
left,
Bay
so that'd be-
Vipers.
LA Wildcats.
Yeah,
LA
I think those
Wildcats.
are the last 2.
All right, that's all 8.
So that's the XFL.
Woo. Okay, so we're not terrible.
Okay. Arena
Yeah.
Football League. I can name one.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
Yes, and this is the only one I can name. The Philadelphia Soul.
And then
That
there
is
was
it.
the Washington Valor was like
Yeah.
a newer team.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
so
we
we
got
can get
2
2
out of.
AFL.
And then there was also the Kurt Warner really good at footballs.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a very
Uh,
good one, actually.
Should we do any other leagues?
Um,
You want to do that?
Yeah, we can try the CFL. I don't
The
really know
CFL?
any.
Calgary Stampeders.
The Argonauts is one.
Where are they from? Ottawa?
Toronto.
No. Maybe Toronto. There's an Ottawa team. Is it the Ottawa Red Blacks?
Red Blacks.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
We
yes.
talked about this last time.
Yes.
The only reason they're called the Red Blacks was because a previous Ottawa team
Their
had red and black
uniforms.
uniforms, which is a bad. That's
Yes.
bad. Bad name.
I think that's the only one I can think of currently.
Is there like a Vancouver team?
There is a Vancouver team. The BC Lions.
The British Columbia Lions?
BC
there we
Lions.
go.
Yep,
So what is
there
that
we go.
for?
Right, so we eventually
We
got
got
there.
4 out of the 9.
There are 9. I thought there were.
There are 9.
Okay, that's a weird number. There are 9.
Yeah, it is a.
That's a weird
It's
number.
a weird number.
Can we do any other leagues like the NFL Europe? Do you think you could do it?
No,
Well, I can name the Frankfurt Galaxy.
Oh yeah.
Monty wins.
I can do in researching the AAF. Bill Polian. Sorry, Monty. He worked for the Chicago Blitz.
I just want to point out that Monty is not at all offended that we're keeping up Bill Polian.
So, based on our extensive knowledge of the XFL, it doesn't seem like marketing was the issue. So why did the XFL fail? Unfortunately, many think the biggest cause was the poor timing of starting a new professional football league right before the COVID-19 pandemic. Like the rest of the world, sports had to completely freeze at the outbreak of this pandemic that led to huge financial losses. Many members of the XFL truly did think the league would have succeeded otherwise. Eric Galco, the XFL director of player personnel, thought the end was frustrating, but mostly because it was like, damn, it was going to work. And that if you talk to anyone in the XFL, they would be shocked to know that the XFL wasn't going to be doing this for a long time. This extreme belief from within the league, the early financial success, and the $500 million commitment to the league that McMahon made would all suggest that there was nothing wrong with the business structurally that led to the fall in the league. Despite the positive statements made by many of the league's figures, once the league was put on pause, many internal affairs immediately suggested that the league was failing. First, once submitting the budget for the 2021 season, Oliver Luck never heard back from McMahon. In addition, team communication staffs were told not to talk about the league's plan to resume the following year. Finally, the league made payments to the WWE that would have made the WWE an unpaid creditor after the bankruptcy filing, meaning that the league paid back all the money that it owed to the WWE before it was shut down. All three of these bits of information suggested that there was some underlying financial issue that was preventing McMahon from committing to another year of the XFL. One easy to identify cause of the loss in McMahon's ability to finance the league would have been the pandemic. However, there are reasons to believe that the league would have failed eventually even without the pandemic occurring. For example, in January, before the pandemic affected the United States, McMahon fired 2 creditors of the WWE, and the WWE lost 20% of its stock value as other investors pulled out. This, combined with McMahon's drop in net worth by $1 billion in the previous year, could have meant that McMahon would not have had the money to pay the remaining $200 million he committed to keep the league running the first 3 years. To add on, the mere fact that the WWE was having issues was a bad sign for the XFL, since many departments of the WWE and XFL were either shared or worked closely together with their counterparts, meaning that the WWE suffering would probably lead to the XFL suffering internally as well.
This is not that related, but imagine your net worth dropping by $1 billion and you just being okay. Like financially.
I can't imagine my net worth dropping like $100 and being okay with that.
Yeah, and like his net worth literally dropped, I think, above a third of his total money. Like even at a normal scale, a third of your money being lost is going to like set you back hugely. But as a billionaire, the fact that he lost a third of his net worth and still is just fine is kind of ridiculous.
A multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
A multi-billionaire lost a third of his net worth and is still a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. But you know what? I think maybe his goal was, because a lot of those things we're sharing, was he was planning on selling it anyways. I mean, it was being successful. And if there was like no thought about subsidizing, maybe he was like, we're just crank it out like a really popular product, make some money, and then sell it before it goes under, because spring leagues tend to go under after a few years.
I mean, it's hard for me to believe that without the corona intervening, that the XFL would have not at the very least finished the season, right?
I agree, yeah.
So it's harder because of that for me to believe that Vince McMahon put he pledged to put $500 million into the league, and that sold for only 15.
Well, so I mean,
I understand that it's like a bankruptcy deal, but still.
What I think, I think plans changed when the pandemic hit, and he didn't want to run a league because it was probably stretching his departments really thin if they were sharing things. So in my imagination, the original plan was that I don't think the XFL was going to fail, but I think, again, that he planned to sell it afterwards, and popular sports teams, even unpopular sports teams like in the NFL, can sell for multiple billions. Like effectively, if a team in the NFL can sell for as much money as Vince McMahon is worth, maybe his thought was, if he makes a super popular product that has flaws like any other similar product, but within that first year does okay. You can maybe make a little money, maybe, work at a loss, but sell it for a boatload of money. And then I think things changed with the pandemic. Maybe his expectations were that it was going to fail a few years down the line, so he was going to sell it no matter what.
And like, just to be factually correct about like the viewership in the XFL, it was dropping, but that's because it's like any product release, right? You hype it up beforehand. Sales of it are going to be super high at the beginning, and then it's just going to plateau over time. So it's not necessarily that it was getting less popular. It was just like going where the average was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to see how those numbers would have been affected once the playoffs started, to see if some people may have started to come back to see a more meaningful result of a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to pick your guys' brains. I wonder what you guys think of where the XFL is going now that we know that The Rock and other investors are taking it over and gonna maybe change things, maybe keep it going. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think one huge thing that would be interesting to me is to see if The Rock is going to keep Oliver Luck as the commissioner and CEO after he just sued the league for wrongful termination.
Ooh, that's a good. I'm curious. Yes, I mean, maybe there's some former players, or I guess almost players, kind of talking to each other with that.
I feel like if Oliver Luck is like given the choice, they want to keep him on. I think his problem in the end was more towards Vince McMahon than the league or itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
getting ghosted by his boss.
Yeah, I believe that he'll come back if given the choice and given a new contract. Obviously.
I think if he does come back, that would be good for that. That would only be good for the league and probably be the best thing they could do. I also think I wonder if The Rock is going to make it more player central, kind of the way the AAF was doing. I mean, obviously that's a little bit more money, but he came out and was very like positive and encouraging to a lot of NFL hopeful guys that maybe don't, miss their shot or whatever on social media. So I'm curious. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think he'll maybe change some things in like the way players are represented, or an educational stipend, something along those lines? Or do you think he's going to keep it relatively the same?
I think he'll try to, but it'll be interesting to see if that will pay off for them, because the first iteration of the XFL was extremely player focused, but I don't know if I wonder if they'll try and learn from that and maybe not go as all in as they did the first time.
I don't think it's I don't think it needs to be more player centric. Like obviously the AAF had more player focused things such as the educational stipend, but while that's an ideal that everybody should strive for, I don't think it's necessarily a need for the way the XFL was going.
Yeah, it might not be the best financial move for them. I mean, their product was wildly popular for an alternative to the NFL. And I think, it wouldn't be bad if they kept things kind of status quo, but I personally hope he maybe changes it up just a little bit, and kind of brings a little bit of a new flavor in. I think we're all very curious to see what happens.
So what does a spring football league need to survive?
A spring league would be no different from any other regular business in that it just needs money to endure.
Cha-ching!
Money was the reason the AAF was eventually discontinued, and as we said earlier, Vince McMahon was willing to fund the XFL for a few years before it was self-sufficient, but eventually pulled out when he thought it wasn't worth it anymore. The main way money comes in is through TV deals and viewership. Viewership was decreasing, but I truly believe that had coronavirus not intervened, the XFL would have lasted at least a couple more years. It had enough unique features and enough talent to be a really, really good TV product, which it was. So the next question would be, is there any way that a spring football league can survive while getting around the money problem? I believe that there is. The only real solution is to be backed by someone not unlike Vince McMahon, a patron who's willing to take a loss in a short term to produce a return in the long term. For McMahon, the return was most likely a financial one, but this doesn't always have to be the case.
Yeah, like I wonder if Dwayne The Rock Johnson would have some different things that he'd be looking to get out of it rather than just pure financial success as someone who used to be a professional athlete.
The MLB, NHL, and NBA all have minor league systems that they fund for two main reasons. The first reason being to bring their sport to smaller markets that either don't have or have a small chance of getting a major franchise. The second is to develop players. The path of least resistance for the existence of a spring football league is for the NFL to start it themselves as a true minor league. But that brings up a whole other issue. With the other leagues I mentioned, in the MLB and NHL, athletes can come to the league straight out of high school, and in the NBA, they only need to be 1 year removed from high school. Many times, players entering the league could be as young as 17. These players most often require development due to the fact that they probably haven't faced a high level of competition, and they just need time to adjust to the big leagues. So minor leagues are really effective. In the NFL, since athletes are required to be 3 years removed from high school, college football most often takes care of this development process. The NCAA effectively acts like a minor league in a sense.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the youngest players we've seen come out of college football recently have been, was Juju Smith-Schuster 19 or 20 when he came out?
I think he was actually 19.
I think he was 19,
barely.
but like besides him and maybe Devin Bush, right?
One of the Edmonds brothers, I think the one who went
Trey
to
Edmonds.
the one who went to the Bills.
Bills, yeah,
That was-
He was like 20.
Yeah. So I mean, but those are like the youngest guys. Like guys come out at ages of 21, 22, 23. Guys generally come out a lot older.
Additionally, the nature of football is just a little bit different. What I mean by that is because football is such a high contact sport, not only does the athlete's body take a beating, but there's also a heightened injury risk. Because of this, players have a much shorter lifespan in the league on average than in other sports. If an athlete is only going to be in his prime until his age, let's say 33 year, do you want him to be on the NFL roster at 22 years old? Or do you want him to be in a minor league and then come up at 27?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, but I think like something that maybe like, baseball does really well is they have a lot of players in their system. And if they're competing for championships and maybe they lose a pitcher, they might have one ready to go that can fill the fifth or fourth or third spot. I mean, maybe guys that can usually fill a first or second spot probably come up a lot earlier, but maybe if they're 25 and they've spent years in the majors, they have what they're good at and they can come up when there's a roster spot for them. But on the other side, it's definitely a different sport. So I can see why the NFL wouldn't need that.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the NFL would define the players' rights to different teams if they do a minor league system as well, because even with the current setup, people who are on an NFL team's practice squad aren't subject to stay with that team. They can literally be signed by anyone else. But like with the MLB, the major team completely owns that player. And if another major team wants someone in the minors, they have to go through the major league team to trade for them to get access to that.
So what you said about the how long a player spends in the league, I think it's 3 or 4 years.
It's like a 3.2.
Yeah, it's not a lot of time. So I mean, which is very different than a sport like baseball, where if you're successful, you can play for a very long time. Like not everybody is going to be Tom Brady. Most people are going to be that guy that comes in. Maybe he helps your team win a Super Bowl by like making one catch that season or making one stop.
Like a David Tyree.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, you don't have to be. Not only do you not have to be an NFL star, most players aren't, and most players spend less time in the league. So why would you want a guy for just 1 year? I mean, maybe from an organization standpoint, from a general manager standpoint, that can be useful. They can just like pick up a guy, but like I don't know if I was a player, I would really want to be just in the NFL for 1 year when I know that I have more than just 1 year of football in me. So we've all done research on different areas. I looked at the AAF. Monty looked at the XFL. Do you guys think a spring league can exist? And I guess maybe in addition to that, do you think one will exist in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I really do think the league can exist. I think what we saw with the XFL being so close, at least from an outer perspective, to being a team or a league that was somewhat successful. I think it's just a matter of time that even if the XFL doesn't come back soon, that another league will try and take its place and try and copy the ways the XFL tried to operate itself. Kind of try and just be a team that doesn't want to incorporate directly with the NFL, but just be a league that becomes successful by itself.
Yeah, I personally think for long-term success, a spring league or an alternative league based in the United States needs some form of subsidization from the NFL. After looking through the kind of AAF deal, obviously the way they went to it was wrong or ineffective. But I think, I think first of all, I think the XFL is the best chance that any spring league has. And I think if it wants to last more than 3 years, it's going to need some semi-partnership. So that even could be with like the NFL Network, just something to show that there is some connection to kind of bridge fans.
Yeah, I'd agree that the XFL, in my opinion, has the best chance to succeed in the form that we saw it last. We didn't get to see how it played out, but I think it would have been successful, and it would have been here for at least a few more years if COVID-19 had not come around. I also think that the NFL as a league subsidizing another spring football league is, for like developmental purposes, is probably very unlikely, just because, as I mentioned earlier, the NCAA college football essentially acts as a minor league for them and develops their players for them. So in a way, it's like, why would you shell out money for something you're getting for free?
So today we talked about the AAF, what it was like, why it failed, and some of the really interesting things. We also talked about the XFL, what it was like, why it failed, and maybe what it will be like in the future. And I think we had a really interesting discussion about the future of spring leagues and what they need to exist. If you guys have thoughts or ideas or maybe some information we didn't get to, make sure to tweet at us at LightsOutPod, or maybe message us on Instagram at When the Lights Go Out Pod. Also, make sure to check us out on our website, whenthelightsgoutpodcast.com. You can see all our blog posts there and get all of our other podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Eli.
I'm Moof.
And I'm Monty.
And this is When the Lights Go Out. See you next time. Never have I been ghosted as hard as Oliver Luck just did.
You took my joke. I said it last time. I was going to say it again.
You can say it again.
Never have I been ghosted.